So a House Republican has had enough, and he's officially leaving the Republican Party. So it's Representative Paul Mitchell. Isn't that like a shampoo company guy, right? Paul Mitchell? I think that's the shampoo thingy. Anyway, so this guy announced he's officially leaving the Republican Party. He wrote a letter to Republican leadership, and he was like, I can't do this anymore. And his reasoning is, as you might expect, that he thinks it goes way too far how off the rails Trump and his hardcore base has been in terms of just lying about the election, claiming fraud and having no evidence and standing by that narrative to the point where they would happily just overthrow the result, not even being close to getting the result that they want or that they say happened. They would still just overthrow the election. Biden won the popular vote by over 7 million votes. 7 million! Imagine Trump won the popular vote by over 7 million, and the Democrats were just like, no, we think we won. What? Now, of course, in the Electoral College, it's a different story, but Biden still has 306 electoral votes. Like, they don't, even if you grant them all of their shitty claims, Biden still wins, but they don't care. They would just give the election to Trump. That is pissing this guy off. So, he says, quote, if Republican leaders collectively sit back and tolerate unfounded conspiracy theories and stop the steal rallies without speaking out loud for our electoral process, which the Department of Homeland Security said was the most secure in American history, our nation will be damaged, he wrote. He says, I have spoken out clearly and forcefully in opposition to these messages. However, with the leadership of the Republican Party and our Republican conference in the House actively participating in at least some of those efforts, I fear long-term harm to our democracy. Now, don't get it twisted, because what he plans on doing is supporting individual Republicans moving forward who mirror his values. I'm sure his values are values I wouldn't agree with, and you wouldn't agree with either. But he is leaving the Republican Party, and he is, for the remainder of his term, identifying as an independent. So I guess the question is, how much credit do you give somebody like this in a situation like this? And my response is, some, but just not that much. I give him some credit. And the reason why I don't give him so much credit is very simple. It's like there were 1,000 straws that broke the camel's back that he didn't think were instances of this is too far gone and too crazy. And, I mean, really, you should have been hearing the alarm bells with, like, the Iraq War and torture and the deregulation of Wall Street and cutting taxes for the rich that led to the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. Like, the list goes on and on of all the things where you should have been like, this is unacceptable. Even, like, the fact that Republicans, until very recently, all of them were just totally against, like, gay marriage. You know? Kind of inexcusable if you think about it. It's like being against interracial marriage back in the day. Like, these things weren't moral red lines for you. You know what I mean? Like, so he tolerated quite a bit, or maybe even agreed with quite a bit of that stuff. But this is the thing where he's like, okay, this goes too far. So on the one hand, it's like, well, what were you, asleep? Were you a zombie for the past however many decades? Like, none of those things were deal breakers for you? But then on the other hand, it's like, we also want to encourage more people to do this because this is the correct thing to do. So we should welcome it, and he does deserve some credit. You know? Like, yes, it's extreme to have to get to this point before you realize it. At least he is acknowledging it, where other Republicans will either not acknowledge it, even though they know they're wrong, or they'll go along to get along, or they'll believe the insane conspiracies that have no solid evidence to back it up. So, yeah, I want to give him some credit. I do want to give him some credit. Even though I'm not giving him that much credit, I'll give him a little bit of credit. So I'd love to see more of this happening. It is reassuring to know that that feeling that you have when you watch all this unfold and you're like, oh my God, how are they even making these points? There were some people who described themselves as Republicans who felt the exact same way, who were like, are you kidding me? Seriously? There's been 50 lawsuits. You've lost all but one, and the one that you won was like procedural nonsense. You've had your day in court and you failed repeatedly. Who's your star, witness presenting all the evidence? Sidney Powell, who's a nutcase? Rudy Giuliani with hair dye dripping down his side of his face and one ball popping out of his fly? Really? These are your heroes? It's so silly. It's so silly. But anyway, credit to this guy, but not too much credit. He probably should have left a long time ago, but hey, better late than never, I guess, is the old saying, right?